Just before we get going, like to just acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we call Australia and their connection to land, water and community, and pay my respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to recognise the incredible work of the Outhaus orators in supporting this great community project where we talk about all things that are in the outdoor education, outdoor instruction, outdoor leading, outdoor sector. David Maskell, who has done a lot of the groundwork to actually put this together, who is one of the orators, unfortunately sent me a message just prior to session and said that he had been delayed because, wait for this people, he's holding up the end of a catamaran. So I guess someone has to do outdoor work occasionally. So that's David's. David will hopefully be here later, as will our colleague Cherie, although she's picking up her daughter. So anyway, I'm going to largely throw over to you folks who are actually Adventurous Journey leaders or have some experience prior to leading the award to carry me through this, because as I said, I was sort of thrust into this as a last minute and haven't necessarily got my head around the award, although I have been to the international DofE webpage, and I'll just share that in the chat, and there seems to be quite a lot of resources which one can, and this is the gentleman I've been waiting for. Welcome, Mr. Humley. I'm very excited to have you here. I've just done an initial introductions, and I was looking for someone who perhaps had a little more experience and background in the Duke of Edinburgh award scheme, who could perhaps talk from a position of expertise when you stepped into the house. So welcome. I don't mean to put you onto the spot, but as you know, David was I guess the catalyst behind organising this Outhaus session, where we were going to bring together a group of people to have a discussion around the Duke of Edinburgh in the International Award Scheme, and he has been delayed through his job. So I am, I guess, running this session in his place, but I'd like people to throw in, and perhaps you can make some opening remarks about DofE and where it is, at least from a Queensland perspective, and then other people can follow up from there. Craig, if you like. Or not. Okay. Let's just have a bit of a run around the room. Who in the room?
We might just need to tell Craig that he's muted, whether he knows
yes.
that or not.
Hello, Craig. You're just muted. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Someone muted me. I did say join with microphone. Yeah, sorry, Pete. I was trying to say that I came in halfway through your introduction, but I got the gist of it. David's away, and you want me to do some intro after you do roll call.
Well, David is not hopefully away for the whole time, but he at least is going to be away for the first little bit. Yeah. So if you could,
yeah, I understand that.
Yeah, maybe give a bit of a general intro to the DofE award scheme and perhaps Adventurous Journey leading, and then we can sort of go from there, if that's good with you. Thanks.
Yeah, question without notice. Yeah, basically, yeah, the Adventurous Journey part of the Duke of Ed Award is preparing the young people to be able to plan and lead the second journey in each of their award levels. So it's not about being guided through. In each award level, bronze, silver and gold, they do two journeys. One is a practice journey where they learn, practice to put together to be able to lead the second one. And then the second one is put together by the group, planned and put together, or should be, and then completed with a supervisor, credit supervisor, shadowing nearby in case of takeout, unfortunately, because of an unfortunate incident in New South Wales about 15 years ago and the coroner's inquest findings. So people who've been around for a long time doing the award will tell you that we used to just get dumped somewhere and head off and have to complete 4 days for their gold and turn up again at the end, which was never really the case, because there were good instructors and supervisors who were always in the background somewhere with checkpoints or observing from a distance as they went through. So it's very much about giving the people the skills to be able to plan and put together their own journey. So obviously within bronze, which is a 2-day overnight journey, they need to be able to, so I lost my train of thought then, I got a distraction. That 2-day overnight, the skills and expertise required in that are less than what they need to do in gold, which is 4 days, 3 nights minimum out. And then they get a chance to reflect on their practice and apply that for their planning for their qualifying. Within each award level, they do the same type of journey. So if they're going to do a canoeing trip for their qualifying AJ, they need to do a practice canoeing trip. So they practice what they're going to demonstrate in the qualifying and being able to do it. But they don't have to do the same medium of travel through bronze, silver and gold. They can change that around and do the appropriate training as they need to. Those journeys are meant to be supervised by an accredited instructor, as said, and in Queensland, if they're using their own staff from the award centre, be that a school, a youth organisation, statewide scout group, for example, something like that, those people need to have gone through the Duke of Edinburgh Queensland's office AJ register, which is like a little bit like a teacher registration board, where currency skills are put to an independent body and they say, yeah, this person's right, you can use them in AJS in that medium. I don't believe that exists in other states. I couldn't tell you what other states do in terms of their quality assurance on their AJ supervisors. I'm not familiar with that at all. So I'm really talking from a Queensland perspective.
Craig, if I just might interrupt, is there anyone else in the room who might be able to shed some light on what happens in other states?
Well, I did some work for a number of years with a school down in Point Cook that put all of its students through the bronze. Okay, and we actually provided the leaders. Yeah, but what we did there was that we did some work so that they did the planning, the navigation, yeah, both with their teachers and us, so that they planned the trip, and our guides were only along as emergency managers, yeah. But there was no testing through a state body or anything like that. Because it's an outdoor thing, you're required to use a licensed tour operator, yeah, someone that's accredited by Parks Victoria. Or at least licensed by Parks Victoria anyway.
If I can add to that then from Queensland, that provision to use what we call an external provider is someone staffing outside your own award centre. That can be done in Queensland as well, but the award centre is then expected to run the risk assessments and quality assurance on that organisation's guides, instructors as well. So there's within their organisation. So there's a check that way. They're not limited to just doing it with their own staff, but they may choose to. And it's just about that quality assurance and trying to safeguard the well-being of our participants as much as possible. I'm done.
Is there anyone else in the room who has experience with DofE either within Australia or in an international setting?
Hi,
I think
Pete.
I saw Jeff. I think I saw.
Oh. Sorry, folks. It's Robin here, Robin Fox. Yes, I've had experience in Australia myself. I've done the Gold Duke of Edinburgh Award, going through from bronze, silver and gold at school. It's a really valuable experience. And I think that, to me, the best part of it was, I suppose, doing different things that I hadn't normally done before. One of them was to go to a home with physically handicapped students. And that was a real eye-opener when I was like 15, to go and to see how those people live. So I think if we can give the opportunity to students at schools, I'd say go for it. The other amazing part for me personally was the residential project, where you went for 10 days. I actually went on a tall ship in Victoria called the Alma-Dopel, which they're redoing now. And I think any opportunities such as the Young Endeavour, the Alma Dopel. I know people in Victoria used to go to Minnegundy for their residential program. I think they're really valuable experiences for those students.
Yeah.
Thanks. Jess.
I was going to say, yeah, I've got some experience as well. Like Robin, I've done the award and also worked with PCYC Queensland as an award coordinator within the PCYC clubs, and then as well for state office as the coordinator for the state, supporting the clubs to run Adventurous Journeys as well as the award itself. And then I also worked with Antipodeans as well, which would do international expeditions, which participants could use as either residentials or adventurous journeys as well.
Can I ask Jessica? So when you were working with Antipodeans, the trekking part of their trip, they were actually using that as the Adventurous Journey qualifying. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, that's true. So it'd either be, depending on where they're at in their award, it could be part of their practice or their qualifying. I know Craig and I have discussed this before, so he may have different opinions depending on the state and where they're at. But yeah, we did have young participants that were from WA and from New South Wales who would use it as their practice and their qualifying, and be signed off as well by their award units. But we did have specific programs as well that were designed for Duke of Ed if there were external participants that wanted to come in and use it specifically for that.
Well, like a lot of those trips have a project component or a service component. A question for either Craig or anyone else in the room. Are you able to use that particular part of that trip to qualify the service part of the DofE award?
Yeah, you could use it for service, but it wouldn't give you long enough if you're looking for the weekly, hourly commitment. You could contribute to some of that, but those go over in Gold Award, they go over 12 months. You can use it for the residential project if there is a project focus about the 5 days that they do it. So, for example, many of those go and work in a village, helping with construction, teaching children, that sort of thing, and it's over 5 days. There's the project in residence. Some of and we've had this point when people submit their gold and find out that doing a tourist learning about the culture of a country, for example, staying in hotels, if you do what I call sort of an under 18 Kentucky tour, where you enjoy and look at, there's no project in that. People try to say that's learning the culture or leadership development, but when we drill down into it, it's really just a tourist R&R exercise. They've gone and visited places of importance, tourist ventures, but they haven't really learnt about the culture, if that makes sense. So it is very possible. This is why we say talk to us before you go, so we don't have the disappointment at the end of them finding out they've been told it's suitable and it's not. So it is certainly suitable if it's structured the correct way. So the village components, yes, usually not a problem. Often what's the problem is they're not 5 days, which has to be the minimum for the res project. And what Jess was referring to before about the difference we have on the journeys, it's not that the journeys can't be used for their practice and qualifying, it's whether the young people lead the qualifying component of their journey. Often in a lot of these commercial companies, they're guided, and that's understandable because the company has so many connections to make through their 3 or 4 week program that sometimes they've got to get through these walks and then they get there, you know, so they're guided more than the time if you're finding your own way and you make a NAB decision, for example, or you want to stop and look at something and change your plan and move your campsites that we would all do if we found points of interest. That's not always the case. And again, we can find out pretty quickly when we talk to the participant afterwards, read their post-journey report, you get a pretty good feel whether they've actually planned and led the journey beyond picking which one of 3 different hikes we might do out of our itinerary choices. So practice, yes. We also look a lot of it. Some kids will just carry their day packs and do the walk through and not look at anything along the way and have their gear driven around for them by the company, which is a great experience, but it's not really the kids being self-independent, self-reliant, which is what the journey is. So there's the difference that Jess and I have in some of the journeys aren't eligible. They have to be worked on really well. So we get the disappointment of a lot of kids who've done these overseas journeys, sometimes 2 years ago, particularly with COVID now, submitting their award and finding out that they weren't actually eligible because of the way it was done. But yes, it's very possible to do that when we get back to doing those sort of trips. Bearing in mind that you can do those sort of trips in Australia now. You can go and work in an Aboriginal station or area community out, you know, North Queensland, outback Queensland, Northern Territory, do all those same things and do those touristy things as well as a trek. But it doesn't seem to be as popular with Australians for some reason. We're happy to help third world countries, villages, but we're we're more reticent to do that with our own disadvantaged third world people, if you like. So, sorry, I'll get off my hobby horse.
Thanks for that, Craig. Neil, I noticed you made a comment in the chat, and I was just wanting to follow up from your experience in the UK. Do you notice any obvious differences from helping deliver in Australia and what you saw in the UK?
You're muted, Neil.
Oh, I'm on mute, am I? Ah, okay, thank you. Gotcha, right, okay. I think the structure of the DofE has changed, not changed. It's been a few years since they did it in school, then helped out in Queensland. But yeah, trying to grow young people's, the way they think, the way they do things, the way they're recognised. The core of it is still there. I don't think it's changed too much.
That is good to hear, Neil, because the requirements of the award of what the young people need to do is supposed to be standardised around the world. And I'm an awardee from back in the 70s as well, and the requirements are still basically the same. It's been tweaked a little bit from my days, how you actually complete your hours and everything else, but the essence of what everyone around the world should complete are the same. And it's good to, you know, whether that's done at the highest level in all parts is, who knows. You only find that out when you talk to people when they've been through the award from different parts of the world.
Nice to see you again, Craig.
Yeah, likewise, Neil. It's been a while.
Yeah.
And Jess for that matter. I'm done. Back to you, Pete.
Yeah,
If I could jump in there, I think one of the big changes as well for the award is, or in recent times, has been the move to an online record book. So people who went through the award, and Craig, you're probably better placed than me to know the exact dates, but, you know, call it 5+ years ago, used to record all of their hours and their reflections in a paper logbook that they then would get sent through to the award office. But now there's an online system called the online record book that centralizes all of that information. And I think as a AJS, Adventurous Journeys supervisor myself, who both works directly for some award centres, but also with a few organisations that are contractors, external, having that single point of online truth makes it really easy to assess and provide the feedback back to students and award participants.
Yeah, g'day, Henry. Good to see you. Say good day anyway. You're right. They started bringing in Australia the online record book, which actually was designed in Australia around 2011, and they made it mandatory in 2015 that everyone had to do their record keeping on the online record book, other than those who had a genuine reason, such as in remote areas where their internet connection was very unreliable, so generally like that, or whether there was an issue for a consideration for a person. So we're coming to the end of the possible submissions by hard copy record books. I think all those who started their gold around 2014 are probably the final batch that will be able to submit by hard copy record book, I believe. You've got mixed views on that. Some people who did the hard copy book reckon the orb is worse, and you'll have people who do the orb now who only had a little bit with hard copy book will say that the orb's better. I think it really comes down to how familiar you are with using the orb as to which way you sort of prefer, I think, nowadays. I see Dave has just joined us, so I'm going to flick back to Peter or David.
Well, I'm just gonna segue to David, who, as I said at the start of the meeting, did a lot of the legwork to set this session up. Welcome, David. So far, we've had just a bit of a round the room chat about the award in various places, and Craig has given a great introduction into the Adventurous Journey component. I wonder if you could put your 2 cents worth in as both an Adventurous Journey supervisor and someone who's running the award at the school. Go for it.
Thanks, Pete, and apologies for not being in the meeting, everybody. When the boss says we've got to unload some trailers because I'm the warm body on campus, that's what has to happen. So putting new rolling brackets onto a new trailer that's been repurposed for a camp that's happening in 2 weeks. Yeah, I thought this would be an interesting topic to discuss inside the Outhaus, in the way that we've brought people together from different parts of the sector, to sort of reflect on the fact that it seems like a lot of the administration is really well supported here in Queensland, and I can't say enough for Craig and the crew there, the Queensland Award Authority, in terms of responding to more my dumb questions or my hard questions about, can I let the student or the participant do this activity and why not? The stuff that I find is the biggest challenge for me, being only in the role since August last year here at Somerset, and the school having a brand new program, is the Adventurous Journey component is massively big if you really think about it, in terms of even at the bronze level or whatever level you're looking at, and obviously it's a sequential build up for the participants in their development of their skills in the outdoor arena. But it seems like there's a lot of award leaders and a lot of award centers out there who have their own purpose built inside of their organization plan on how they're going to implement the Adventurous Journey component, how much detail, how much where those resources are coming from, and how they're adapting and using those resources to engage with an audience who are predominantly 14 and 15 years old and have very, very busy lives. I know that my participants here are massively scheduled, have lots of extracurricular, and they take this on as an additional thing. So I guess the reason I was having the meeting, or was facilitating today's discussion a little bit, was about how do we connect as a community to share those resources? Like, how to do a strategy briefing is common across the industry. It's not secret squirrel stuff. It doesn't need to be kept in a silo or within an award center. So if your award center is new to Adventurous Journeys, or you outsource it because you don't have that skill set, how do you find out how to use, or how that lesson plan would look on the ground, both when you're doing training, so the preliminary training requirement, and then actually when you're out there implementing. Now, when you're out there implementing, obviously if you're a qualified outdoor educator and you've got your AJS, away you go, doing what you would normally do in that framework, working within your own guidelines and known protocols. But if you don't have that information, how do you access that when it seems like there's a lot of this, it's just isolation. It seems like there's a lot of isolation. This is just my opinion. So I don't know if anyone else has had the same challenge, if anyone else has found it being really challenging to find the resources. I know that when I stepped into the role here, the previous outdoor coordinator and Duke of Edinburgh award leader had taken a lot of information from other places that she'd found, rebranded it, put Somerset on it, and away she goes. There's nothing wrong with that, I think, because it's all about sharing. But is it a common theme, or am I just uniquely placed that I've sort of stepped into this environment and haven't feel like I'm out there by myself a little bit? What am I waffling on? Sorry about that.
David, I'll kick it off for a start for saying with what your predecessor did. If you're going to take stuff and rebrand it, it's a great idea, but make sure you take it or run it against perspective from Queensland, because there are little nuances in different things in what you rebrand. But the essence of how you teach young people to go on a journey, how to navigate, what gear to pack, they're all pretty similar. So I'm sort of saying if that's what you're talking about, she's rebranding, I don't have a problem with that. No need to reinvent the wheel. But just watch it sometimes at the nuances of what you do, how you do it.
I completely agree. I completely agree, Craig. And this is where I get to the thing of how do you measure outside of your professional judgment of someone who's been doing it for a long time? In my example, because I've been doing outdoors for the next few years, I can read something and go, yeah, that's good. This is not so good. I'm going to adapt and take the bits in and out that I don't like. But if you're say, an award leader, but you don't have a big outdoor ed background, and you are trying to bring your skill set up to that, how do you gauge that material you might have found on the internet or passed on by another award center or another award leader who's generous with their resources? How do you gauge that the information is actually meeting a standard requirement? And I guess I come back to the VET model, which has its quirks and its people who don't like it and people who do like it across Australia. Why do we not run this through a VET process that's very, I don't know if it's transparent. I know there's lots of people in this room who have also been involved at that level of training. Is that something worth looking at to try and find a consistency of, and I'll use the Trangia example, a Trangia briefing being consistent between XYZ Award Centre and 1, 2, 3 Award Centre? How do you compare that level of training from centre to centre, or are we not that worried about it as we're under the umbrella of the Duke of Ed International Award, Duke of Edinburgh's International Award? We're not so worried about that consistency, provided there's other outcomes from it. And I guess that's where I'm struggling with a little bit.
I'm going to toss that, let other people come in onto that first, because I don't want to dominate just from my perspective of what's along. Because, go Jess, yep.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, David, like, there's a lot of that standard stuff, because the risk assessments that are done, like you've got standard stuff that will be with Queensland Award Authority, but then, you know, as each individual, whether it's Queensland Ed, whether it's PCYC, whether it's Somerset, you guys have your own risk assessment, and then I guess that the standard of how they're taught has to be the standard of your company, because it's your company that's signing that license agreement saying that you're doing this and making sure that it's of a particular standard and that it's safe, basically, I guess would be my guesstimate. And that's sort of how I've done it, depending on the different organisations that I've worked with when we've done Adventurous Journeys for participants, is that it has to meet the standards of the organisation I'm working for. And then, you know, you've also got the guidelines that are in your, in the resources. I'm trying to think of what the operating standards that come from Queensland, because you've got that really big resource thing which says and explains everything in there. And there is like a little tick and flick box for the training before participants go on to do their adventurous journey that says they know how to do this, like they know how to do that. And then I guess it would be the standard of the organisation that you're working for, because Queensland, well, at least I know in Queensland, they sign you off to say that, yeah, you're an award, like, I guess, and I'm guessing Somerset themselves is an award centre. So they're agreeing that you can run the award. But Craig, I'm happy for you to chime in there, or any other award authorities.
Jess, I might jump in there, and I've you know, worked as AWST and as an outdoor leader for Duke trips for a number of different companies, both in Queensland and New South Wales. And I do think the difficulty, and it, you know, probably comes from that kind of two-layered system, is that there can be really different focuses outside of the safety aspect from different companies, which maybe comes back to Dave, what your point is about really understanding what the core is, because I know I've worked for some operators that place very little value on making sure that participants plan their food well. To the extent, you know, I've been on an adventurous journey just as an outdoor editor, where every single meal that was catered by the participants was dehydrated food, and very little thought had gone into that. And on the converse side, I've been on another trip where making sure that, you know, the participants brought really healthy food and that they prepared it all while they were on the program was a really high priority. And so maybe that's where, Dave, and I don't know, it would be good to get your insight, maybe that's where you see the contestation come in.
And I've been as an outdoor educator in the freelance market, both here in Queensland and more so in Victoria, where, and this is going back many, many years now, so maybe the evolution of the program and different states approach it differently. But, you know, the tick and flick aspect of the Adventurous Journeys sometimes was, this is our training and our practice trip. And, you know, I would run a really good briefing, but the food would still be very ordinary that they were preparing or were bringing to the program as a self-catered part of the journey. And it was very disconcerting as a professional to be signing off, and this is back when we had the paper documents, so more than a few years ago now, it was disconcerting to sign off as, okay, I'm signing as my reputation that say that you're competent to this level with very little knowledge that I would have had as background towards what the goals or the aspirations of the AJS was for this this group of participants. It was a Murray trip that I recall extensively. Just the whole group was getting their tick and flick, and there seems to be still a culture of that within, not within Queensland, but within maybe the greater community, that's still something that still gets talked about a little bit, probably in the wrong fashion. And I'm trying to bring, as a new award centre, bring the bar really high, not to make it unachievable for the 14-year-old participants, but to bring it high enough so that I can know that I feel proud that when they get their bronze, that I've signed off and I've been there throughout the journey, that they're going to have, they could go to anywhere else to do their silver, and their transit briefing or their campsite tidiness or their hygiene practice or their navigation is as good as you'd expect. Yeah, and you'd be proud to have that as I guess it's that ownership thing of having developed the development of the young person, and they're able to take those skills and apply them in another context somewhere else, whether it's in a silver at another award centre, or whether it's just going out doing their own adventures. My concern is there doesn't seem to be, and maybe I'm just not reading enough of the documentation, there just doesn't seem to be enough consistency or directions about what it should really be. And I'm not saying it needs to be spelt out for me black and white, but I don't know how we adjust to that as a award centre or as the greater Duke of Ed program. Other comments?
Well, I'm just going to throw a comment in, and maybe some people who are more experienced in working within the Duke of Edinburgh space can answer for me, but surely in people who are running and delivering adventurous journeys, there's going to be a range of experiences within organizations of those people and the organization within that space to be running the Duke of Edinburgh Award. And those staff who are running those awards are going to have various different trainings. So I think all that is going to come into play in how that award is run across, the country or even the world. Do other people agree, disagree? Is that how it is?
That's the ideal, is that they should all be meeting the criteria and what the expectation of the award is. But of course, we're dealing with human nature and people's interpretations of things. A couple of points that people made there. David saying that that not so much in Queensland, that there seems to be organisations that everyone's going to get the award, we'll get as many through as we can and not be so concerned about the quality standard of what we're giving what the young people are experiencing and learning. Unfortunately, that still exists in some award centres in Queensland. We come across them occasionally, become aware of them, and then try to work through them on dealing with that. David, I'd say to you, in a bit of the action and comparing, you can't really control what other award leaders and staff are doing. That's part of why we have the AJ register in Queensland, is to try and standard that through the vet system or tertiary training or other qualifications, so that people have a good understanding and skill level in the mediums they're working in, and then hopefully that they're able to realise that it's a little different, say, to a standardised school camp, which is a great experience. I'm not detracting from that. The main difference is on a school camp, a lot of the activity is provided. I think Henry said that they're given the food by the company or they're told bring this, whereas Duke's is about trying to teach them and explain, how do you set up a menu? How do you tweak it? If you brought this one on the first time, it's all D-high and it didn't work. Now let's reflect on what did you see someone else doing? So it's a little bit more of that expertise and being willing to hand over the control of the leading of the journey. That's a big issue for a lot of people in outdoor, I think, who are less experienced, because they've got all the issues of concern of well-being and developing the kids. So back to David's point, you've got to go with what you think. And if you think it's the highest level of matching what others do, keep going with it. Don't give away because other groups are doing different things. Remember, it's about what your young people, maximising the experience and learning they can get from your journeys. If you work on that, not only when they go to the next award level with some other award centre, when they start doing their own stuff as adults in the outdoors, they're going to be far more responsible and safe outdoor users. And that's what I look at when I look at my one. I want the kids to be able to, they may never become great bushwalkers, but I want them to be able to plan, put together similar types of journeys. And if they do love the bush, be out there in a responsible and safe manner. So that's what I set my objectives on. So I really spend a lot of time on the kids being able to learn how to plan and put it together. We might walk the wrong way. They might have a bad meal for one night, but then through the reflection and learning, when they come back next time, they're like us. They've learned trial by error and try to get it better. We do try to work on the standardisation and education of Adventurous Journey supervisors. We have workshops for risk management, and there we talk a lot of networking and how we do that. But in terms of saying standardisation from the Queensland level, we don't approve or disapprove the risk management and teaching procedures on an AJ. We will look at the plan of the whole AJ. It meets a number of days, the correct staff-student ratios. We might ask, are they actually planning leading? How's this going to be done? You know, if you're taking 40 kids on a 5-day journey together, how are you meeting your numbers and how are the kids actually getting a chance to plan and lead in that? So we'll look at those sorts of things, but we can't, I guess, decentralise that responsibility to the award leaders and then whoever they use as their expertise on those journeys. They've really got to liaise and talk through with them. And I've often talked to a few outdoor external providers. I think Adventure Guys were talking about one there before. I've gone and chatted with met with the award leader and the representative of the company and say, this is what we really want the kids doing an award AJ to do. But I then can't get involved in that contract and costing between those two parties. I can just inform this is really what we want. So if the award leader is not quite as experienced in that, I'm happy to be the external spokesperson, mediator between that, if you like.
Thanks, Craig. I might pivot the conversation just quickly because it's coming up to the top of the hour. Tracy Edmonds is from South Passage Adventure Under Sail. I invited Tracy along for this afternoon's meeting. Lovely to meet you, Tracy, face to face. We've been email buddies for a little bit. Looking at we do full disclosure. Somerset is a client of Tracy's, and we send our Year 11s out there for about 25 students for their Year 11 as a choice, one of 5 that they get to do in the classic Year 11 multi-choice outdoor end of year program. Tracy runs a whole bronze and silver within a 4 or 5 day, I think it's 5-day tall ships tour. Tracy, can you just talk, you've seen where the conversation's been going, could you talk about how you guys adapt and how you deliver an AJS in that framework? Because it's a very different model and it's one that I'm excited about, but unfortunately not for this year. We haven't got the budget.
Hello, everyone. Yes, we have dispensation through Queensland Dukes to run an adventurous journey, the practice and qualifying components concurrently. Because we're a sail training vessel, it's not ideal for us to, for example, run a 3 or 4 day journey and then, or voyage, where kids develop skills and then later on they come and just repeat the same 4 days. In order to achieve a gold standard, we need a longer period of time where we progressively develop their skills both in teamwork, in leadership, and obviously in the ability to sail a tall ship. So what we do is run a 3-day voyage within sheltered waters only as our bronze adventurous journey. And that covers both the first couple of days. There's some preparatory notes that I send out to all participants where there is some sailing stuff that they have to become familiar with, terms and structures of the ship. But also, because we run a 24/7 roster and the kids do anchor watches at night, and get up, they don't have to cook their own meals. The meals are prepared on South Passage for them. So meals aren't a big component of our preparation, but we actively encourage them before they come on board to fully explore what sort of clothing requirements are you going to need. It is the weather. They have to look at detail at the weather forecast. Is it likely to be rainy? Do they need warm weather gear? Have they got enough clothing, because there's limited space on board, so there's limited ability for what they can bring? Have they got a set of clothes that remain dry at all times? So even if they get wet up on deck on watch, when they come downstairs and have a hot shower, have they got dry clothes and warm clothes that they can get into. So they have to address issues of hypothermia in their preparation and sunburn, sun protection, because there's very limited sun protection up on deck in the middle of the day. And also the big major one is seasickness prevention. So all those things, they have a considerable aspect of planning before they even come on board. And then the first couple of days is just them working with their watch leader, coming to terms with how do you sail the ship. And then progressively, we ask students to step up in each watch and take the role of bosun. So under the guidance of the watch leader, they actually run a watch and go through attack and allocate people to positions. So they're progressively needing to demonstrate more and more understanding of the sailing process, but also the ability to create a cohesive team, because the boat can't be sailed by individuals. It can only be done through teamwork. In our silver voyages, they are 5 days, 4 nights, and that requires some open water sailing. So they're more obviously through voyages. So we would go from Manly to Harvey Bay through open ocean. We would go from Townsville to Cairns. So they're transit voyages where there is much more navigation asked of the kids, and there is open ocean experience. So it's quite a different preparation to cope with the swell. They're not in shelter. In the gold voyage, it's a minimum of 7 to 8 days where there is extensive open water sailing, and there is at least one leg of 24-hour plus continuous sailing without anchorage. So you can't expect kids on a 3-day practice voyage to achieve that, and then months later, because we only offer adventurous journeys in school holidays, they would have to wait months to get to the next available one, and we can't do an open ocean leg logistically in only 3 days. So that's why we do things a little bit differently. We are an award certified award unit, but we don't take kids through any other aspect of their award other than the adventurous journey. But we do offer our experience as a gold residential, but we have the prerequisite that they must have done at least one adventurous journey with us, and then their voyage is focused less on being part of a watch and the sailing and team experience, and they have either a mentor role on a younger kid's voyage, or they could be an assistant to the cook, for example, or if they have a life-saving certification, they can become a life-saving watch person when there is a swimming activity after the boat's anchored. So we look at different ways to encourage them to participate other than one focused more on the adventurous journey framework.
Thanks, Tracy. Thanks for the good summary. Any questions for Tracy? It's a very different model to taking your group out for a bushwalk.
I've got a comment, David, or 2 comments rather than a question. One, just a little correction for Stacey. The agreement that they have to run these journeys back to back, as we call them, Tracy said concurrently. It's actually consecutive. They run them back to back. That's right. That's with the National Award Office, and that was done in the early 2000s. I imagine the Queensland Award Office at that time would have been involved in the discussion and liaison between South Passage and the National Award Office. That was done there, and it was also because South Passage gave the undertaking that the further into the journey, the more responsibility that the participants would take for sailing the boat. So by the end of the journey, they would actually be sailing it under supervision, but not direction by the crew, the volunteers going on that. And refer a little bit back to what Henry said before, because of the food, if I have any participants going on South Passage, they have to supply me with a phantom menu for their qualifying journey of what they would think they would have to put in, how much food for their group of 3 or 4, using the galley, what they knew about the boat. And then they evaluate that compared to what they got provided on the journey. And that's in part of their post-journey report, where they're actually doing a really effective evaluation of their own planning menu. So if they're ever going to go back and do their own sailing journey through the Whitsundays, again, they've had a little bit more expertise in how to plan a menu on board a moving sea vessel with the limited space and stuff like that. I understand Tracy can't do it with health and work safety and everything else. Part of the revision of why they allowed is because the young people stand watches. It's different to land-based journeys, I guess, where they rest for the night usually. They do their minimum number of hours involvement on board the boat. They're doing it through that time, which is why they have the reduced number of days, but not the number of purposeful hours involved for that journey. That's it. Someone else?
Thank you, Craig. Can I just clarify, particularly in the silver and gold voyages, on the evening of the last day, the participants elect from the participants a skipper and a sailmaster and a navigator and the 3 watch leaders, and on the final day they are put through a series of navigational challenges where the kids themselves completely run the boat and get the boat from point A to point B within a given time period, which is the final day of the voyage.
Do you call that person Mr. Christian, Tracy?
Depends on how they behave, I guess.
Or Master Bligh, one or the other.
I have a more general question, I guess. It seems like this whole responsibility to the students seems to be key from everything that everyone is saying within the DofE award scheme. I've just been Googling while we've been sitting here, the Duke of Edinburgh website for Australia, and you get to a section in resources where you can actually pull up a list of activity providers. And whilst I'm sure not every activity provider is on the list, I thought it was interesting that a lot of the people in the room are representative people who are running Duke of Edinburgh in schools, and there's no schools on the list. Is that some sort of limitation to schools? And the second comment I have, I guess, about this list is it seems to be a whole lot of trekking companies that largely run trips for people overseas, which I think would potentially, as Craig suggested in his opening remarks, perhaps detract from that student responsibility that we're trying to promote. Comments?
Can I go first? If no one else, someone else want to get in?
I'd just say, in terms of Victoria, I've just checked in. There's a well-known residential program that goes for a year, and part of that residential program is that students come out with bronze, the Bronze Award. They don't have to do anything extra for it. That's included in part what they learn and do throughout the year. So they basically just do logbooks and submit their log as per what they've done throughout the year. Yeah, so I know that's certainly in one Victorian school that's the case.
If I can come back to the activity providers you saw on the national website, Peter, because each state has its own one as well that does with it. I would suggest that schools aren't on that list because schools' charter business is not really to run activities for other organisations. They're within look and run it for themselves. So they wouldn't become a national registered activity provider. I just don't think there's the scope within their operations to do that. And while organisations are listed on the national website as registered activity providers, that doesn't mean that any of their activities are guaranteed to meet the eligibility for the award sections. It simply means that they've agreed, they've negotiated, they've discussed with the National Award Office, and they're aware of the requirements and ethos and philosophy of the award, and that they will create activities that will meet those eligibilities. And when we say that someone comes to us and say, well, look, we're using this company with an RAP on the national website, we'll go, that's great, but it's still your responsibility to make sure you do the activity with that registered provider meets the criteria and eligibility for the award activity. So those overseas companies, as we said, they might be on the national side as an RAP, but that doesn't mean the activity they offer your district Duke of Ed participants is going to meet the AJ criteria or the RES project. That again comes back to the award centre's responsibility to tweak that program if need be. Would you agree with that, Rick? Oh, sorry. Yeah. Each award centre has the ultimate, final responsibility to try and ensure the activity meets the award requirements, both for risk assessment of compatibility compliance, and also for the philosophy and what the young people are going through. And that's why our state officers are there to help advise you and work through with what we can. Over to you. Someone else.
That was they weren't AJS providers, Peter, that you're looking at. They were providing services for all parts of the award. Or wasn't clear? Yes,
David, they can do. They can.
You know how hopeless I am at technology, Dave. I'm just looking on the, as I've now learned, is the national website. But you can drill it down. You can have a list of activity providers for state. And yeah, I'm just sort of drilling it down by Adventurous Journey activity providers, and you can look New South Wales, Queensland, Victoria.
Jessica's put it in the link in the chat if those want to have a look.
Predominantly they'd be for Adventurous Journeys, but there is provision to do it for other activities, Res Project and sports, for example. There is the provision to do that. It's all run from national, but it's not exclusively for Adventurous Journeys.
Okay. All right.
Now
you got.
Yeah, quick question. You say that most activity providers are trekking companies or businesses, whatever. I'm just wondering, most Duke of Edinburgh Award candidates, students, are they high school students, or do they come through other organisations, scouts or cadets, for example?
I can only talk for Queensland. Probably, and I'm trying to think of the figures, I think about 75% are school-based activities for award centres, maybe 80%, and community organisations like PCYC, Scouts, Guides, statewide youth organisation, church groups make up the remainder, but that doesn't correlate to the participant figures either. Generally, schools will be a bit higher because there's more schools doing it, if that makes sense, and larger population cohorts that would be interested in it. I can't talk for other states, again.
Okay, so 80% roughly, ballpark figure, high school students, but they use an external provider?
Not necessarily. There are quite a lot of people who don't complete their award in year by the time they finish at school. So they may then be doing it with community organisations they can join, like PCYCs or other companies, that external providers. There's a couple of open award centres around the place for that provision. And also for kids whose school or youth group doesn't offer the award, they can join some of those community ones.
Now,
but the bulk, go.
I was going to say, I had an example. I had a bronze student who didn't finish last year, and she was in year 12, and so she's now seeking services outside of the school because she's graduated and moved beyond our award centre, I guess, involvement as such. But she can transfer, and we have had a student transfer in from China who had started the award in China and is now gone on to silver, I think, or no, I think she transferred in as whatever. She transferred in from China from another award centre. It was all very transparent and easy to do. So, yeah.
Yeah, I understand, Dave, that you're doing it at your school, and some schools do it, especially the private schools. In my experience, it's hard work to get a high school, especially a state high school, to back the Duke of Edinburgh's award and commit to doing it, and teachers just don't have time. I think that's a hurdle. I'd like to see a way we can, if there's a way we can overcome that.
I think that's the biggest challenge every award centre leader and leader would have, is I definitely put it back, and I in my limited experience with the award, I put it back on the students. I go, all right, you want to do dance? You've definitely got to find a dance teacher. And now you've heard protocol might be the dance teacher at the school, but then you might need to go and inquire with a local dance school who have got the right qualifications, they've got their blue card, and they're willing and able to do it. I'm fortunate here. I have a huge staff who are happy to sign off on awards for students who are doing a lot of extracurricular. It can't be obviously something they're doing for their schooling directly, which sometimes can be challenging for students to understand, especially if they're 14. But I do hear that, though. Outside of maybe the private sector in the state school environment, maybe that's much harder to encourage. Has anyone got any stories or opinions on that?
Well, I think just from working with PCYC, we would find that we'd have schools approach us to see whether kids could transfer through to PCYC and different things, because within the public sector, they found those roles weren't paid. And so it was expected that the teachers would volunteer as award leaders, which, you know, amongst what they're doing already is a lot of work. So sometimes they would have the best intentions to start up the award unit with the school, and then maybe after a while realise how much work it is and actually want support with the load, or just weren't unable to run it anymore. In which they could either reach out with the Queensland Award Office to then find other places to send participants. But that was sort of the experience that we had, or they'd reach out to us to, you know, mostly for volunteering as well, because sometimes volunteering within the school environment, if they did run the award, was hard. So we could partner with schools to offer volunteer opportunities to young people as well.
I know from one of the Queensland Award Authority Zoom training sessions that I've been to late last year, I've connected with a few other award leaders and AJSs, and hearing their stories, how they have to definitely engage the parental aspect of it to get volunteers to come in and get involved in extra bodies on AJSs as supervisors or as support staff for ratios and numbers, not running the trip obviously, but and having to really leverage in a time of COVID and a lot of details in terms of a lot of stress on the volunteerism in the community in the greater sense at the moment, even though we're seeing it here in Brisbane with all the flood volunteers coming out of the woodworks. It's really hard within a school context to have people give up weekends or hours after work to definitely either coach, mentor, and then sign off on award sections. So it's definitely a challenge, I think, for the award moving forward, but something that possibly has been, because the award has such a good reputation, I've not found it too challenging so far in my new position here, but touch wood. We've just doubled our intake. We went from 21 to 51 now active in the program in some level, either bronze, second year bronze, or silver. So I'm finding the amount of approvals and admin quite overwhelming, but I'm getting there. We're going to wrap it up very shortly because we're almost at the end of the meeting. I might throw back to Pete unless there's any other questions for anyone.
Not a question, but yeah. What I was thinking is, oops, that's all right. What I was thinking, I'll talk to the Outdoor Council board. I think information about this program and other programs that, personal development, leadership and the like could well be, just a synopsis on the Outdoor Council of Australia website, so that schools and organisations or families or individuals that might want their children to be a part of a leadership or development program could access a whole range of options. That might increase participation in the Duke of Edinburgh as well as others.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, sounds good.
If you do it before you post anything about Dukes on your site, you'll need to talk to the National Award Office about that when you have your discussion, but someone from National or one of the states will be happy to liaise with you.
Well, I mean, the intention for the Outdoor Council of Australia is to slowly, start involving all the other peak bodies in the organisation of the council. So, and the running of it and making sure the information's out. So that would be a part of the process. The starting point is probably to convince the existing council members that it's a good idea, and then come up with a plan of how to implement it.
And if you get someone who's been involved in it for years and years, who's passionate about it, they'll help you with that discussion to convince them as well. People like that about. Okay, but I was just saying, be wary. Some people go and stick the Duke of Ed on their website and then find out they're in breach of branding and stuff like that. So I like the way you're going. You're going to bring the people in and discuss.
I mean, all I'm really talking about, whether it's scouting a Duke of Ed, would be you'd talk to the national bodies anyway, but you just have a little synopsis from the organisation as to what the training and program is all about, and then you just have the links to your own information, to the scouting, Duke of Ed and so on. So we wouldn't be providing additional stuff. We'd just be providing a pathway to what you're already you're doing.
Yeah, sounds good.
I fully hear what you're throwing down there, David. I think that idea of collaborating amongst organisations, and particularly nationally and internationally, is part of what sort of created this organization, and hopefully we can see more of it going on in the future, with obviously recognizing different organizations' branding and not stepping on any toes in that area. I'd just like to thank everyone for coming, specifically Craig Humley from Queensland Duke of Ed, and everyone else's comments. Thanks for joining us inside the Outhaus for another interesting and proactive session. Craig, if you could perhaps throw your contact details in the chat, then that would allow people who perhaps don't know how to get in contact with Queensland Dukes, if you would be so kind to do that. And next time we meet, which is on the 21st of March, bit of a plug, we've got Lucinda Martinelli, who's a US-based consultant, and she's coming in to talk all about facilitation from a different perspective. She runs a company called One Planet Consulting. So be tuned for that. I am going to stop the recording right now, and then we can just have our usual